In its 125 years, the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra has presented hundreds of new works, including original commissions, as well as world and U.S. premieres. Not all were without scandal. As the 1915-16 season for the CSO gets underway, eager musical interest turns toward Germany, not just because of the war, but because of a new work by Richard Strauss.
At this point in history, Strauss is still the most famous living composer. He hasn't written a symphony at that time for 10 years, and there he comes out with a major orchestral work. Getting that kind of premiere by Strauss was the biggest deal you could achieve.
Strauss himself conducted the first performance in Berlin, but outside of Germany, musical fans were still eagerly waiting. In the U.S., a handful of prominent orchestras wanted the American premiere, including those in New York, Philadelphia, and Cincinnati. New York had first rights. They just had to get the scored musical parts back home.
There were pretty established channels for how you went about this, except, of course, it was wartime, so it wasn't as simple in 1915 because Europe was at war and you couldn't just go call Berlin and get someone on the phone and say, can we have the parts for the Alpine Symphony? It sounds like New York and Philadelphia didn't go through the same channels, so there might have been publishers' representatives in different places. The parts for New York, they were bogged down because of some kind of British bureaucracy somewhere.
We were very lucky because of this embargo, the parts couldn't arrive on time, so they changed the program of the concert. So with that, there was this famous competition between Cincinnati and Philadelphia.
At the time, Ernst Kuhnwald was the musical director of the CSO, the same position once held by the current maestro in Philadelphia, Leopold Stokowski.
When Leopold Stokowski moves to Philadelphia, maybe under less than ideal conditions from Cincinnati, and then this chance comes up to beat Cincinnati to the punch, that might have been just irresistible for him to enter into that contest.
Determined to win this race, Cincinnati and Kuhnwald had been working their own channel to secure the rights and musical parts for an American premiere.
Ernst Kuhnwald, he had worked with Richard Strauss. So the 5 years before he came to Cincinnati, he was assistant conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic, and that was a city in which Strauss had lived for a decade already and would live for another decade. So they were not direct colleagues, but clearly had probably professional connections for many years. We don't know if Strauss was able to help out in any way or he was even part of this, but it's not too far-fetched to think that somebody in Berlin could have pulled some strings on behalf of their old colleague Ernst Kuhnwald.
It speaks about this will, this appetite to discover new music and to promote new music. People in Cincinnati wanted to know what these pieces were.
Not wanting to repeat New York's mistake, Cincinnati held off on announcing the premiere until they knew they'd have the musical parts. Luckily, those arrived stateside in early April, giving them enough time to prepare for a premiere at the May Festival, May 4th.
The May Festival had, with I think just one gap, had presented a Strauss tone poem every year. And for its prestige, its connection with Strauss, getting a US premiere would have been a tremendous coup in that tradition.
Alpine Symphony was his last amazing tone poem before he concentrated more on opera.
He did live right next to the Alps, south of Munich, and so the landscape to him, that was where his workroom was. He had a view to this every day. He signaled three things that were his central inspirations. They were work, family, and nature. So, of course, in the Alpine Symphony becomes nature is one thing to worship.
His genius of orchestration, describing sunrise, waterfalls, arriving to the top of the mountain, storm, of course it's very episodic, but at the end, this big arch speaks more than a mountain. It speaks about life.
Part of life and nature is survival of the fittest. With only a few weeks left to prepare for the Cincinnati premiere, Philadelphia made a major announcement.
So Cincinnati has it scheduled during the May Festival. Philadelphia then announces, we're going to perform it on April 28, about a week earlier.
The leap ahead leaves Kuhnwald and the CSO only about a week to respond.
What is Cincinnati going to do? Well, they decide, we're going to have it even earlier than that.
Completing their dress rehearsals on the 25th, Kunwald and team quickly decided to have a performance on the 27th, just a day before Philadelphia. To keep it secret, they waited until the day of the show to announce it to the public.
So they invite everyone down, open the hall to the public, and have people come in droves, as was reported, and thereby beating Philadelphia and not giving them a chance to counter.
There is this wonderful phrase from Leonard Bernstein, to say, to make a great thing, you need a lot of energy, involvement, talent, and not enough time. So probably they didn't have enough time, but when you read the reviews on that, it was such an event, and people were very impressed by the quality of the playing.
More than 100 years later, the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra continues to musically raise the bar, seeking out the best new voices and celebrating the contemporary like it's part of the canon.
Competition is even tighter, but we have more than 100 years of experience of this sort of race. It's not let's be the first against the other, it's let's be leaders. That I love. And I want to continue that.